Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it already on the channel with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I'm trying to hit 125,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. I upload 6 to 7 days a week on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference. Also, real quick, there is a new episode of the podcast out. Me and 3 of my buddies, one of them being Mojo, sat down and had a really fun, casual conversation when we first landed in Atlanta, so go check that one out. Here is a clip that I'm going to present with no context, and if you want the context, you're going to have to go watch it. He hits this deer, and it was like, yeah, just a regular hit. He drives home and goes up to bed, and I wake up in the middle of the night to hear screaming, and deers do not sound good normally, let alone when they're in agony. So I didn't go out there when I should have, because it wasn't that loud. It was just like, Bro, clip
that. Someone clip that and put it on Twitter right now. Someone do that, please.
Dude, deers do scream, like they scream really weird.
Go check that one out. Link is going to be in the description. So I kind of sat on this topic for a while, and probably a while too long because it's no longer really all that relevant, but I'm still doing it. James Harden and the Houston Rockets lost to the Los Angeles Lakers in 5 games in a rather disappointing fashion. After this, the head coach of the Rockets, Mike D'Antoni, informed the team that he would not return to coach them, and with D'Antoni's game plan being the foundation of this team for many years, as well as the depressing cap sheet and pick situation in the upcoming seasons, the future of the Houston Rockets does not look great. And with James Harden being 31 years old, it's looking more and more like he is going to be one of the best players of all time to not win a ring, at least on the path that he is on right now. So the question I have to ask is, at what point would it be smart for James Harden to demand a trade, regardless of how much of the failure of the Rockets could be blamed on him? At what point is the future of the Rockets too bleak for a player who only has a few years ahead of him to not demand a trade? Like elite superstar years ahead of him, he's not gonna die. But let's talk about whether or not James Harden should demand a trade. So first thing that I want to do right out of the gate is talk about James Harden's history with the Houston Rockets, because one question that I think is interesting here is, would James Harden be justified in demanding a trade? Over 8 years with the Rockets, has Harden given what he should in order for it to be okay for him to ask for a trade, and have the Rockets not given enough to where Harden should feel obligated to stay with the team? Would it be questionable for Harden to ask out, and would Rockets fans be justified in being pretty mad at James Harden? Early on in his career in Houston, he was a very different player from what he is today. He was still getting buckets, but in a more versatile fashion. One of my probably more out of the ordinary takes is that James Harden was a better offensive player in his first few years in Houston rather than his last few years, despite averaging less points on lesser efficiency, because he had, as the Instagram kids say, a much deeper bag. However, unfortunately, the help wasn't quite there around Harden initially until they signed Dwight Howard. After a horrible stint in Los Angeles, Dwight was looking for a new star 2 guard to play next to in James Harden. Unfortunately, however, these two did not mesh particularly well. It wasn't just these two. There were names like Chandler Parsons, Patrick Beverley, Trevor Ariza, Jeremy Lin, and like 5 minutes of Terrence Jones in there, but it wasn't quite enough, especially with Dwight and Harden having some beef. Now, some people might blame that beef on James Harden. However, with Dwight Howard having his track record, I'm going to go ahead and assume that was on him. But that's not to say that the Rockets were not frequently disappointing in the playoffs, even if they didn't have championship expectations. In their first 3 years together, Damian Lillard took them out with his first career playoff game winner and series-ending game winner, and then they got dicked by the Warriors twice. After Dwight left the Rockets, they tried to build a more all-around roster by adding Ryan Anderson and Eric Gordon, making them one of the better shooting teams in the league. However, the playoff struggles really picked up from there, and with him as the lone star, Harden really got the brunt of the blame. First First year with this new roster, they face the Spurs in round 2. Kawhi does not play game 6, and yet the Spurs still win as James Harden puts up 10 points on 2 for 11 shooting. Probably the worst game of his career. After that though, Daryl Morey gets to cooking and puts together a deal for CP3. Now Paul was obviously declining at this point, but he was still a very, very good player. This is where the Rockets went from, yeah, they're probably like a second round exit team, to they could be very good and they can win a championship. Now of course with KD now in Golden State, they were the favorite, but the Rockets were the team to point to and say they can beat the Warriors. And despite Paul dealing with injury problems, they managed to push it to 7 games. However, they missed 27 consecutive three-pointers, which is just a wild number when you really think about it. That means the Rockets missed, and missed. All of that in a row. Holy shit. James Harden in this game had 32 points on 49% true shooting, which is not amazing. They run it back next year, and an opportunity arises when Kevin Durant gets hurt. However, in the game where Durant was no longer closing it out, James Harden fell asleep at the wheel and they ended up losing the series in 6 games, despite Durant not playing 1.5 games. And then, as I said in the intro, the Rockets trade Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook, and now we saw where that went as they lost in 5 games to the Lakers. And I want to just say one side thing about Chris Paul. If I see one more of these fucking I'm the new Chris Paul State Farm ads, I am going to Kurt Cobain myself, because I cannot fucking deal with it. Stop these ads and end my suffering, please, for the love of God. But anyways, we're caught up to today. Where do the Rockets sit? Well, Harden, Russ, Tucker, and Gordon are all in their 30s. Daniel House is too busy clapping cheeks to play for them, and the cap situation is worse than those Chris Paul commercials. Actually, it's not worse. Nothing is worse, but it's up there. So the future of the team looks rough. At this point, with his history with Houston and all of the shit that's going on right now, would Harden be justified in demanding a trade? Well, even though I did say the future is bleak, I really mean the next 4 seasons or so. The next 1 or 2 seasons is not necessarily going to be a downward spiral. They could even win a championship if all of their cards were played right. Anything is possible. If you would have told me that the Clippers would lose to the Nuggets in the playoffs, I would have said you were full of shit. So anything is possible. Really, where the Rockets could go depends entirely on what happens with their coaching situation. I think a coach implementing off-ball movement into the offensive scheme in Houston could go a long way. I also don't think that abandoning small ball is the solution. At least I don't think abandoning 5 out is. I've heard the idea of trading Eric Gordon for Al Horford, and if they could do that, that wouldn't be horrible. Though I also don't entirely know what to make of the Rockets, because the hope with small ball was that they would take a hit defensively, but their offense would get better. But then the opposite of that happened in the playoffs, so I just really don't know. All I know for sure was it wasn't small ball that made them lose to the Lakers. It was A, the Lakers being a better team, and B, Russ and Harden, mainly Russ, falling short in the second round. So really the short-term future of the Rockets is up in the air. I could see a good coach figuring it out because there's a lot of talent there, but the clock is ticking. And if I was in James Harden's shoes, I am demanding a trade this offseason. Look, some of the mistakes and some of the failures of the Rockets have obviously been on James Harden. However, over 8 years now, nearly a full decade, the Rockets have yet to put a bona fide top 10 player next to James Harden, which these days is pretty much a requirement to win a championship. Now, not these days, because I don't think there's a top 10 player in the Eastern Conference Finals right now. Like, I think Jimmy is 11 and Tatum is like 12 or 13. But normally, that's what you need. Even if it is partially on James Harden, the Rockets had 8 years to deliver him a championship, and they did not do so. Again, part of it's on Harden, but a lot of it is on the Rockets. Now, you may or may not believe that James Harden could be the best player on a championship team. I strongly disagree. However, I know that he thinks he's that, because regardless of the degree to which he actually cares about winning, which is debatable, I know for a fact he thinks he's that guy, because, come on, he thinks he's that guy. So in his shoes, I'm asking out. The future of the Rockets is uncertain, and it doesn't seem like it's heading in a positive direction. For Harden, though, with him having a longer contract, unfortunately, he isn't going to be as in control of where he's going as he would be if he was on a one-year deal. So if Harden demands a trade, there is going to be a massive bidding war across the league. And there are a few trade situations that I could see going down. None of these are official, hammered out trades, just pretty vague ideas. And first, I'll address the one that's in the thumbnail. The Heat are in an interesting situation. I don't think they are winning a title even if they make the finals, as it's looking like they will. I'm fairly confident the Lakers will be winning the 2020 championship regardless of what happens. So the Heat could be viewed as a team that is just there, but not quite there. And trading for a superstar in James Harden would more than push them over that hump. Tyler Hero is balling out. I feel confident saying he's going to be a star in the NBA one day, probably one day soon. And him, as well as Kendrick Nunn, some matching contracts, and a good handful of first-round picks is a pretty good return for James Harden. A trio of Harden, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo would be unstoppable if Eric Spoelstra implemented a system that had James Harden play off ball, which I'm certain he would do. Now, yeah, there'd be a bit of a fit struggle. There's no denying that, because the Miami Heat have a no-bullshit culture, and James Harden often comes with a good amount of bullshit. However, if that was figured out, he fit into the offense with some adjustments, and James Harden was not on his bullshit, the Miami Heat would be unstoppable. I could also see a three-team deal where the Clippers send Paul George to the Nets send Karis LeVert, Rodions Kurucs, Jared Allen, what's that other one weird-looking dude? Musa, and a couple of first-round picks to the Rockets, and the Clippers get James Harden. Harden and Kawhi, I think, would complement each other well, and Paul George is a great third option and brings some defense to the Nets. They've been looking for a third star, and that's about as good as they're getting. But the best trade out there, bar none, would be trading Ben Simmons for James Harden, because Ben would be the best player you could get for Harden, and Harden would be pretty much the perfect player to pair with Embiid. He solves the shot creating issue, he's still a great playmaker, really helps him in the shooting department. Him and Embiid can actually run a legitimate pick and roll because the defense isn't going to back up on him. The duo of Harden and Embiid would be great. And that is the trade that I would see going down if James Harden demanded a trade. And Embiid, if he was able to maintain his health, which is a gigantic if, that's never really been the case, if he was able to do so, he would be the best player Harden had played with. It's close between him and Chris Paul. However, Embiid fits a lot better next to Harden, and I think the two of them play off of each other much better than Chris Paul and Harden played off of each other. So yeah, I think James Harden should demand a trade. I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to give it another year or so, but if he did, those are some trades you could expect to see. Tomorrow, I'm going to do a rant video on Anthony Davis and the dumbass people saying he's better than Tim Duncan. Once again, check out that podcast. I also have a Patreon, so if you feel like supporting this content outside of just your like and subscription, I would really appreciate it. That link is going to be in the description, as well as the podcast link. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.